50 years ago, Marvel Comics shocked the world with the death of Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 121. Holding the lifeless body of the woman he loved, Spider-Man vowed he was going to kill the Green Goblin, and the story wasn't over. One issue later, we would see Spider-Man ruthlessly track down his foe, and in a climactic battle of the ages, we would see the Green Goblin fall. In this episode of Tony's Comic Spotlight, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the death of the Green Goblin by shining the spotlight on Amazing Spider-Man issue number 122, The Green Goblin's Last Stand. Gwen Stacy is dead, thanks in part to the Green Goblin, who is racing away, vowing to Spider-Man that he will soon be joining his true love. Spider-Man, furious over the tragic loss of Gwen, swears that if anyone is going to die this day, it's going to be the Goblin. After his mortal foe, he manages to hop on the Goblin's back and pummel him. However, the Goblin manages to get away when he slams Spider-Man into the side of the Brooklyn Bridge. Returning to Gwen's body, Spider-Man fights off those who have gathered around her corpse and cradles her in his arms. Reflecting on their relationship together, when the police try to get an ambulance to give her medical aid, Spider-Man tells them that she's dead and that he killed her. When they try to take him for questioning, he fights them off and flees. Changing back to his civilian identity of Peter Parker, he ponders just what to tell his best friend Harry Osborn about his father's involvement in Gwen's death. When he arrives back at their apartment, Peter finds that Harry is still fighting off his recent overdose of LSD and angrily leaves Harry, who begs for help. Deciding to bring Osborn to justice, Spider-Man drops in on Joe Robertson, who has just heard the news. He pleads Joe to find out if Norman Osborn has been seen in the last few hours. When Joe gets word that Osborn has been seen near one of the warehouses that he owns, Spider-Man is about to leave when J. Jonah Jameson bursts in, calling Spider-Man a murderer. Spider-Man stifles Jameson with a webbing before going after Osborn. Spider-Man battles the Green Goblin in the warehouse, determined to bring him to justice. However, during the fight, the Goblin glider is reactivated, and when the Goblin tries to impale Peter with it, he only succeeds in impaling himself when Spider-Man dodges out of the way. With the Goblin apparently dead, Spider-Man finally getting what he vowed earlier that day, finds Osborn's death a hollow victory. When the authorities can be heard coming, Spider-Man decides to leave, unaware that someone is watching in the shadows. When Peter finally returns home to his apartment, he finds only Mary Jane there waiting for him. She tries to console Peter, who lashes out at her condolences, mocking her usual carefree nature, and tells her to leave. However, Mary Jane decides to stay and comfort Peter regardless. The end. The individual who witnessed the apparent demise of the Green Goblin is revealed to be Harry Osborn in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 126. Harry Osborn had been a major part of Peter Parker's life even before the introduction of his father in the Amazing Spider-Man number 38. When his father dies, the story takes a massive twist with Harry, a friend of Peter Parker, taking on the identity of the Green Goblin. He vows revenge against Spider-Man, who he thinks killed his father. He would battle his own nature for many years before ultimately dying in the Spectacular Spider-Man number 200. Regaining his senses and saving the lives of Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Before Harry died, he was cured of his Green Goblin persona by a psychiatrist named Bart Hamilton. Hamilton helped Harry suppress the Goblin identity for a time. While he did, Hamilton assumes the identity of the Green Goblin for purposes. He tries to find the secret Goblin formula that Norman Osborn intended to use to give him superhuman powers, but fails to do so. In the process, he's killed by one of his own exploding bombs in the Amazing Spider-Man number 180. Spider-Man recounts some milestones in his relationship with Gwen Stacy in this issue. They first met in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 31. Their first kiss happened in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 59. Gwen's father died in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 90, an event that Gwen blamed Spider-Man for, even though Dr. Octopus was responsible. Harry Osborn had been recovering from a relapse into his drug addiction. He got hooked on drugs in Amazing Spider-Man number 96 to 98. A fan poll conducted by Marvel Comics for their series 100 Greatest Marvels of All Time voted this issue to be the 19th greatest issue of all time. Why this issue was such a big deal for Mary Jane Watson. One of the side factors in Jerry Conway wanting Gwen Stacy to die is that Conway found Mary Jane Watson to be a much more compelling love interest for Peter Parker. That was obviously not what Stan Lee or John Romita felt, as their stories typically had Mary Jane coming off very poorly. Peter, under Lee's pen, had said some nasty things about Mary Jane that sure didn't suggest that he thought much about her. In the wake of Gwen's death, though, that was set to change. Mary Jane is waiting for Peter when he gets home, and he just rips into her. He basically repeats all the things that we have seen Stan Lee show that he felt about Mary Jane as a character, except Peter tells it right to her face. Only she is too strong for this BS. She knows that it is just the grief talking, and for once she is not going to run away. She will face the problem with Peter, even if he is being a jerk to her. So she decides to close the door and stay with Peter. Though the Green Goblin seemingly dies in this issue, he survived thanks to a healing factor that allowed him to heal from his injuries, as revealed in the Osborn Journals #1. He goes into hiding after this, reappearing in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 412. The Hobgoblin was created because the writers and editors didn't want to bring back Norman Osborn. After Norman's death, Spidey had a shaped vacancy in his rogues gallery that just needed to be filled. Because death was still treated semi-seriously back in the day, resurrecting Norman was out of the question. Instead, writers came up with 2 replacements for the Green Goblin title. Eventually, writer Roger Stern came up with an entirely original Goblin supervillain called the Hobgoblin. This new villain was introduced in the early 80s, and the big appeal for this character was how secretive his identity was. After many false leads and some confusion among the different writers, the mystery of the Hobgoblin wouldn't be truly revealed until the late 90s. Norman had been dead for 20 years in the comics. Given how prominent Norman Osborn is featured in Spider-Man media both in and outside the comic books, it's hard to believe he was dead for over 2 decades in the main continuity. After having a hand in Gwen Stacy's death, Osborn would accidentally ram himself with his own glider, seemingly killing him. He died in the comics in 1973. At the time, death actually meant something in comic books. When a character dies in a story, for all intents and purposes, the writers wrote it as if it was permanent. Due to the ongoing nature of comic books, however, it was eventually revealed that Norman survived his near-death experience in the late 90s. I hope you enjoyed this look into Amazing Spider-Man issue number 122, The Green Goblin's Last Stand. It was a pretty cool book and a great way to end the whole Death of Gwen Stacy storyline. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. It means a lot, and I want to thank everybody for watching this video or any other video. It really does mean a lot to me, and thank you for supporting the channel. Coming up next week, we'll shine the spotlight on the first appearance of John Walker as the new Captain America in Captain America issue number 333. This was the very first comic book I ever bought in 1987 that launched me into collecting comics, so of course I wanted to do this one sooner or later. And until next time, be safe, take care, God bless. See ya.